Hello, here I am with something I'm working on at the moment. I thought, instead of always coming with some grandiose projects, and then I kind of feel a bit depleted, I thought I might maybe do, random videos from time to time and not so rarely, I guess. So let's see how this goes in 2025. Happy New Year, everybody. I hope that it will be filled with joy and creativity. So at the moment, I'm working on daily prompts that are a part of a Fragment of Your Imagination challenge by Seven Forests, Five Rivers. For those of you who are a part of the Zentangle community, I think that you might be familiar with this. It runs through January, and there are new prompts, new fragments suggested every day. It kind of makes it easier. So I started with these. I don't know if I have all of them here. And then I did a few of them during recent days, which are a bit more minimalistic. There's more negative space than what I usually do when I draw. I tend to fill the spaces with tangles, but I've been busy and I actually liked this negative space around the tangles. So these were the last ones. Then I switched to the back side of two of them, and this was the one that I did when I was the busiest. It was a few days ago. We were assembling some furniture. And I did this, and it seemed just enough. Of course, I could have maybe grown some tangles from these. There are ribbons here, auras, and it would be easy to just expand it and draw around these squares, but I liked it. And this one is a little bit bigger. That was from yesterday. So the commonality in all of these is that I started with a square that I filled with ink or watercolors and then tangled. So I have two things to start from. And this is the regular, white square tile by Zentangle. And here's... I think it's for journaling. It's a stencil that I'm using just to get the square. I try to keep it simple and fairly quick. I mean, whatever you do, however simple it is, you can always make it more complex with the use of tangles and shading and highlighting. So depending on what kind of a day I had, sometimes I decide to make it simpler, and then there are days when I decide to make it more complex, or it just evolves into being something more complex. Anyway, I started with this border, and it's the thing about Zentangle and the methodology of it. When you start like that, suddenly you're not dealing with a blank canvas anymore. I'm marking a dot where roughly the mid part of this side is, and this is where I will use this stencil to mark where my square is. And it's just an idea. I think it serves the same purpose like borders and string in Zentangle. It's basically like putting the string on your tile. It just gives you something additional to start with. Another thing that I used in this challenge is these Viviva color sheets. So this is what I'm using to add color to my tile. And the way that I do that is to first drop just a drop of water, and then I take the brush. And this is one of the brushes from Zentangle's project packs. And I'm distributing this water from a drop across this square. So I will use the wet on wet technique. I also have a glass of water. Actually, it's not a glass of water because I'm using the thing that kids in school use. This it actually has 4 compartments. It's very handy. I'm not sure, it's a German producer. I'm not sure if you can find it outside of Europe, but I think it's great for kids because even if it, you know, if it falls, the water doesn't just run as quickly. I think that's why it's for kids. It's also why it's for me, because I tend to kick things and make mess. And I will just choose a few colors to fill this. And the way that I'm doing it is kind of trying to do it intuitively. I'm just adding colors. And of course, if I want to use another color, which is what I'll do now, I'll use this sap green. These are really, really vibrant and saturated. But before I went to use another color, I just cleaned my brush a little bit, especially because it's a lighter color. And I'm thinking about yellowish as the third one, maybe starting from this corner on the opposite side. And sometimes I use my brush to draw these lines and make, you know, a clear division between where the colored part is and where it's not. But sometimes I like the colors to run into each other just in a more random way. So I think I will do it a little bit tidier here. And now I will just let it, I think it already distributed, spread around, but I think I have a little bit too much water and too much color on some parts, and I want it to be dried quickly. And actually I will use a blow dryer, hair dryer, just so that I can move on with the drawing process. So this is, you see, it's very easy. It's not something that's planned. It's not something that has a particular outcome in the mind. So very similar to our Zentangle principles when we draw, just letting it evolve. And then you can always do these little touch-ups if you think that something needs to be done, and kind of tidying these 2 sides, but it's not like it's necessary. Sometimes I feel called to do things, and that's why I did it now. Anyway, I will now stop the recording and use my hair dryer to dry this, and then come back to Tangle. Okay, here it is, it's dry, and I just realized that I didn't lock my focus before this, so I'm sorry if it, you know, when you don't do this, for those of you who are thinking about making your own videos, if you're using your phone camera, do lock the focus, otherwise your phone will focus on your hand, on your pencil, instead of your artwork, which I guess happened as I was adding the color. Anyway, what I sometimes do if I feel like it is, I prepare several of these stained tiles and then tangle on them in the upcoming days. So just, if you want to maybe do that, it's also something you can consider. So today's tangle or fragment is Precious. It's by Nina, one of the 7 Forest 5 Rivers team members. And I think it's a very cute fragment. And I don't know, I haven't decided what I would do with it. So now I will just do it as, as I will make decisions as I work on it. So I have this fragment which is quite big, and I'm afraid that if I use this to just add fragments to it, it will be maybe a little bit too big. So I will divide this into 4 sections, eyeballing it. So it's more or less the same size, but it might not be the same size, and that's totally fine. And then, as with any fragment, you can choose how you will use it and rotate it in different ways so that you end up having a kind of a meta pattern. So in Zentangle, and I will just start drawing, in Zentangle, we have this concept of reticula and fragments. And reticulum is a grid, and the fragment is a part of this grid. So this is a reticulum with 4 square fragments. And in this challenge, not all of the fragments are square fragments. So it's really, sometimes they are square, sometimes they are seed shape, sometimes they're round or triangular, and different kinds of tangles, fragments. But I always start with this square that's colored with watercolors. So I'm drawing 4 of these precious fragments, and I just now laid down the structure of them, and now I will work on the first of them. So I will not change it. I'm using the fragment as Nina, who deconstructed it, suggested. And it starts with these 2 aura lines on top part, and then you draw a seed shape in the middle, which I'm just doing, and then add aura lines on both sides. Don't worry too much about, or don't worry at all about it being symmetric. And you can see how my lines, these auras that I just added, they are not all, they don't have the same width. Maybe it's too early for that. And then inside this central part, you add some orbs that are like smushed inside, and again, no worries if they are not perfectly shaped. Actually, you don't have to draw the whole round shape. You can just draw these little, kind of fill in the corners, and it will look like there is an orb squished in. I will do the one on the opposite side. And now I will basically repeat what I did there. And again, the spaces between my lines are not the same. And I'm fine with that. Each of them has their own characters. Each of your shapes, each of your tangles, or fragments of tangles, fragments of fragments in this case, they look a little bit different than the one next to it, and that's fine. Again, aura lines. And I think because they are so small, I might ink in these little windows that I left here. And now I feel kind of sorry that I wasn't mindful, a little bit more mindful, to leave more space here. But it is what it is. And there's always ways to deal with it, you know, if you use your white jelly roll. So now I have two, and you know, I get to decide now if I want the next two to be the same or maybe a little bit different. Let's see what happens. I might just continue and add the same shapes and ink in the same sections like I did. Okay, my little fragments are done. And what I'll do now is, when I teach, I usually break down my classes in a different way, or structure my classes in a different way. I usually first use my pens, and then I use the coloring supplies, and finally I use the shades and highlights. But sometimes, and you know, when you teach, you know what you're teaching, so you have your project finished. And it's a different kind of a process than when you sit down to draw just unplanned drawings. When you do that, it's the same thing with the drawing as with shading and highlighting. Kind of one step informs the other. So sometimes I finish one section, I tangle one section, and then I color it and shade and highlight it, and then decide what to do next. So this is what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to add shades, highlights, and everything, and then I'll decide what to do around this little fragment. So this is what I often do when I tangle at home. Just do one bit at a time, not just drawing, but also shading and highlighting. And then I kind of look at it and see or decide what to do next. I'm sorry if you have too much glare from this pencil that I'm using, which is Zentangle's layout pencil. I hope not. Maybe I should have brought the matte pencil, but I hope that it will be fine. And of course, I have the blending stamps, separate blending stamps for the white and for the graphites. I think I need a little bit more in some of these. So I'm trying to make those look like they are tucked behind these sides. And that's why I'm using also the highlight in the middle to kind of create more contrast between the sides and the middle. And now I use the white gel pen in these auras. So I'm adding shade on the opposite side of the black line that divides these two sections of the fragment to create even more contrast. So I'm shading the parts that are on the opposite side. And I think I also need a shade here in the middle between the fragments. But I'm not going to shade the sides yet. I'll see what I'll do with the sides. I don't know. And then I want some highlight on this central part so that it looks like it's raised in the middle. Hopefully. Let's see how it will end up looking. Always when you use some watercolors or whatever coloring supplies and then highlights and shades on top of it, there's an element of surprise in the way that these supplies will interact with each other. And then if you want to increase the contrast even more, you can retrace some of these black lines because they have been muted by the use of graphite. So this is what I like to do, just spend a little bit more time on adding some more boldness from using the black pen, just to retrace some of these lines. I hope that it will end up having a nice effect. I will use just little dots of white with my Jelly Roll 10 to give it a little bit of a white spark, like the shiniest highlight. And sometimes when you use the white jelly roll over the watercolors or something water-based, it's like it sinks into, especially if you are using this kind of paper. This is not watercolor paper. This paper by Fabriano, it's a Tiepolo paper by Fabriano. It's made for prints, for printing. It's a special type of paper that's for printing, and it's very porous, so it soaks up the supplies. It soaks up. It's perfect. I think it's actually awesome with watercolors. But then when you use the jelly roll on top of the colored part, it kind of swallows the jelly roll too, so it's not crisp white as it would be if I used another kind of paper, but I'm fine with that. So my little fragment is done, and now I can think about how I would like to expand this. And what I'm thinking about is, there was this drawing that I did that many of you liked, and I'm thinking about using some elements of it. So I will extend this line on both sides towards the edge of the tile, and then I will kind of mirror the part of the fragment, and it's bigger than this. That's totally fine. I'm not trying to draw it the same way, so it's more or less, I mean, it's not the same, it's a very similar shape to the one in the colored part. And I think right here I will just add, it's almost like rounding, and ink it in, so it will be something that's not symmetric, it will be off center. And I still don't know exactly how it will evolve. I will use some of the elements of the fragments around, around the colored part too, but I will see how much. Maybe some other tangles or fragments will sneak into the picture, and then I will ink in these sections the same way I did. I think it's a nice play between the white and the colored, the way that it just expands and interacts with each other. Okay, now because of the way that this is positioned, I have a little bit more space on this side than I have on this, on the opposite side. And I think I will maybe play with expanding these auras here. And I'm going to aim for this corner and just do something, I don't know, let's see. I will kind of expand this line and draw it in a kind of a lazy S shape, but eventually the lines will meet here in the corner. So let me do the next one, or maybe I can go from the opposite side now and draw the first one. And I don't want it to be symmetric, although it's sometimes I have to be mindful and, you know, try consciously not to draw something symmetrically, especially when you have these lines that are going into a certain direction and they just guide you. So now I will do the next one. Well, maybe this is also not a bad idea. It's kind of like arucas. By drawing one on each side, it will have this woven effect. Let me do at least one more in the same manner, and I will see what happens. So it's really like, you know, just one stroke at a time, and let each stroke be the focus of what you are working on, and then that stroke will inform the next one. I might actually do this. It's sometimes challenging to draw these long lines, so I kind of stop in the middle, or maybe not in the middle, and discontinue the line and then continue it after I rotate my tile so that it's easier on my hand. And when I do that, you can see where that line was discontinued, but it's fine. If you really don't like it, you can always use your white jelly roll to try to hide if it bothers you. So you can see how these are woven in a if I planned it, I could have done the weaving in a way that I wouldn't have these 4 lines here on this side, but it was totally unplanned, and it's fine as it is. I think there's one line here that I will expand on this side, but on the opposite side, I don't think that I have any lines that I need to continue. And now, of course, I have the same thing here, but maybe instead of doing this, I will just grow them into muka shapes. And maybe I will contain these mukas within my borders, pencil borders, but I'm not sure. I will let them just joyfully spread where they want to. When I draw mukas, I always start drawing them from the outer part of the stem. Just, I don't know, it's easier for me, but might not be for you. See, the outer part of the stem then just extends into the outer part of the pod. And maybe I will grow this here, because that line just looked a little bit weird, just sticking out here. And maybe another one here. I will pretend that it goes below right there and then finishes inside of this woven part. It's an interesting growth happening on this side, and I will just leave it be. And on the opposite side, let me extend these lines. So I will do one at a time. I will extend this one, and you can see that I'm extending it more or less the way that it grows from this part, and just doing it in a very predictable planned, almost looks like a planned way, but I haven't planned it, so but very predictable, let's say. So this will be almost like a braid. I might do one more on each side. Okay. I think it will be an interesting drawing once it's done. It's not like I know what it will look like, but I think I'll do the same with the one next to it. This is kind of easy because you just draw aura lines. Rotate your tile, do one on each side, and just draw an aura line, which kind of, oops, expands into these interwoven ribbons. And okay, right now, I might not even do any more of these lines, and I will not do like a regular border that just goes around the whole thing. I will do it on this side like this, and I might even leave the opposite side without it. That's, well, it's interesting. The next thing I'll do is another thing that's kind of predictable when it comes to my drawings, and it's the roundings, which I really love, which kind of is an easy way to transform your drawing and add a lot of visual interest to it. If you ask me, you might not agree, but it's what I love. So, and as always, if you feel inspired to follow or just take my drawing as inspiration, just do whatever feels right to you and let it evolve into whatever you think it should be. I'm extending some of these, inking them in. I'm looking at this and trying to decide if I should do the border on the opposite side as well. But I don't think that I will do it now. Perhaps later I will change my mind, but now I think I will start with shading and highlighting and just see what it will look like when I add the shades and highlights. I have the little general's layout pencil here, and I will just start with shading. So it's a typical Hollywood shading where I'm adding shades so that I enhance the over and under placing of these ribbons. And now with these, you could just add shade to one side of it, or maybe add shade along the middle, which is what I will do now. And then just blend it towards both sides. But I think that my lines are too blurred. I lost my black lines, so I will just retrace them. This pencil is maybe a little bit too bold for the black 01 pen. I usually use the PN, and with the PN it's a little bit bolder, so it's not so easy to mute the lines with your pencil. Or maybe I'm just too heavy-handed. That's also an option. Maybe I'm just too heavy-handed when I'm using the pencil, because this one is really bold, so you might go a little bit easier on it. Again, retracing some lines. And I do want to add shade along this border. Now I'm a little bit more careful about how I'm applying it. And I can always add another layer if I want it to be a little bit bolder. Maybe I could even ink in this part between my... Let's see, I'm just deciding on a whim. And maybe a little bit more dark black boldness is a good thing to have. Okay, I did a part of this, and I want to use my white jelly roll to extend into this fragment now that I have finished the tangling and shading and highlighting. I want these ribbons to be a little bit more pronounced, and I think that the white jelly roll will help. Although as I'm adding it, you can see how it kind of is swallowed up by the darker green that's below. And I can add another layer later when it's dry if I want it to be whiter than it is at the moment. And now for the opposite part, I have one colored pencil here. It's General's Watercolor Teal. I think it's the one of those that I got in Zentangle's project packs, and I'll just add it along the line. I'm not sure what it will look like, but I'm willing to give it a try. I'm so sorry, my phone died and I needed to finish this because once you start blending the watercolors, you need to do it if you don't want to have streaks of color. So I will just do the opposite side the same way. You see how I maybe added a little bit of yellowish from this to this end, but it's fine. Anyway, I kind of like this bluish, so I will use it some more. I think I will extend this, but I will make it like disappear. And I will do the same here, because you know, I don't know how I would connect it with this line. I just made it a disappearing line. And those are, you know, the little decisions that you can make depending on what happens. It's not like you don't have a choice, but you sometimes don't, because the line just take you in a direction and then you respond to whatever happens. Sometimes I feel it's like that. You have the power, creative power to a point, but then if you let go of the need to control, sometimes the creative process kind of has its own will, or those lines, or those mukas particularly. And then you just let them flow and do their thing, and you respond to whatever happens with your next stroke. So some are deliberate, some are, I mean, they're all deliberate, you know what I want to say, but sometimes the process just takes you for a ride and you respond to what happens. That's cool, and I like the way that these watercolor pencils blend. I know that for many of you, watercolor pencils might not be your supply of choice, but I love them much more, or I use them much more than I use the colored pencils because of this, because you have such an easy time with blending them. And if you think that you don't, maybe the problem is your water brush or the brush that you use. This one is the one that I've been using for years. It's Kuretake water brush, which is really, really amazing. So this is something that you shouldn't do, add the color over a damp or wet area like I did right here. But I kind of couldn't wait. Sometimes I have issues with waiting for things to dry. I will fix this later. I will leave it to dry and then I will add a little bit more and it will be better. So that's it for the watercolor for now. And now I will just shade the rest. I will of course add these little smiley shapes on muka pods. I want to shade these ribbons or stems of muka right where they disappear behind another one. So that's my intention, and maybe just add some shade between them. So I start with one layer and then I decide if I want to have more. I don't know if some of you here are from California, from LA area. If you are, I've been watching the fires. I hope that you're safe. Really hoping that the winds will cease and that the fires will stop, and that you haven't had any damage. It's just devastating to see how powerless we are. faced with these natural disasters. Okay, I added some shading and I think I will add some more, at least to be consistent. I have this curve here and I added shade below it, so I feel that I need to do it. Next to the ones on the left, and I think I'll just add at least a little bit of shade on this side. And here with these ribbons, I'll do the same thing that I did on the opposite side, kind of adding some white, extending the white into the ribbon so that the transition between the colored part and the white part is not so drastic. So there's a clear cutoff between where the line is. And you know, you can add another layer if you want, maybe just a few dots or something like that. Be playful with it. Let me see what this looks like now. And now I think this might be dry, so I can add a little bit more color to kind of mask what I did before when I applied the colored pencil over the wet area. And then again, just use my water brush to blend it. Soften those transitions between the colored part and the part that's not colored. It looks kind of cool. I'm not sure if it's finished yet. What I think I want to do is add a little bit more white, at least to those longest ribbons that are on top, to kind of enhance that flow of lines on both sides. You might add a few layers on top of the part that you colored with watercolors. And somehow this huge area around maybe looks a little bit too white. I'm not sure, maybe it's my horror vacui. It's the fear of blank space that I have. Sometimes I just need to add things. I think I will add just a few ghost tangles, so that I don't want to add anything that will overpower what I have. And for those ghost tangles, I really love the plain old print stamp. So I will add a few of those, and I'm using my pencil really lightly because I don't want it to be too dramatic and too big. And maybe this pencil is not the best one. Maybe if you have one that's not as soft. Of course, I have many of them, but not here. So I'm using what I have. You could also use light gray light gray 05 pen. Maybe you took part in the latest project pack, so maybe you have it from before. I think it's a very nice resource, and I used it in one. I will show you. But I think that even these shapes done with the colored pencil add some nice visual interest to the piece without looking too bold and without overpowering the design, which is, it's, you know, quite detailed, so I don't want to add anything that will take away from it. But I'm not sure that I'm adding to it any, you know, either. So it's just when you have a feeling that you should do something, go ahead with it and try it. And that's just what I'm doing. It's experimenting and being fearless with the choices and then learning from them. Even learning from the mistakes, or maybe not mistakes because there are no mistakes, but maybe from some decisions that you made and that you wouldn't necessarily make the next time. So now I'm really stroking the paper so lightly because I want to make them appear as they are floating away from this part where I grouped them, and then maybe even one more right here. That might be finished now. I hope that I didn't go outside of the frame. I will see that now. I will add my chop. It's the letter A. And of course, because I was drawing over these lines here, I will just add a little bit of jelly roll white, and then I will retrace some of those lines so that it looks like there is a coil around this little piece of an aura. Being playful with the chop too. And I think that I'm done. I think my drawing is done. It's a fun one. This is where I used the light gray pen to draw these print up and also the lines right here there that are growing from the corner towards the edges. I love it, but this, you know, if you use your pencil, you can use even lighter strokes to just make the lines disappear. Well, thank you for drawing with me if you have done that. And I will see you soon, I hope. Have a nice weekend. It's almost weekend. And take care and stay creative. Bye.